3/13 on September the 25th. This is the meeting of the Performance and Quality Committee. The chair, Carl Clausen, had other obligations and couldn't be here today, so I'll be chairing today. Let the record reflect that myself, Michael Lavender, Kathy Guinness, and Dr. Jeff Peck are present. The Provider Council Chair, Duncan Sumter, and Mr. Clausen are not present. And that Julie St. Clair and Brian Ingram of staff are here as well. I'd like to make note that we appreciate having our guests with us today. You're more than welcome at any time to join a meeting. We'll note that public comment is available at the full board meeting. This is a committee meeting. Does not have a public comment section, but you're always welcome to attend and listen. So we thank you for that. Our first item is approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections to the agenda that you would recommend? If not, will I hear a motion that we approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion.
You have a motion? A second. A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. That's unanimous. Our next item is approval of the minutes from the August 28th meeting as presented by Mr. Duncan, our recorder. Do you need a chance to look at that anymore?
Michael, I apologize. The minutes did not get sent electronically. They are only in the packet, so.
Okay. We'll take a moment to make sure everybody has a chance to look at that.
I had the packet you sent me, or?
That they're in the package you have, but I just handed them.
I'll probably be back
There,
here.
just pass the third next to pass the
There you go.
Boy, it's really humid in here, I gotta tell ya.
Mm-hmm.
It's either humid or freezing.
It's not freezing.
No, it was freezing. Now it's humid.
Okay. I see.
Those are your two options.
You need a
The minutes look okay to me.
You got a rescue and Hager will be happy if you use it any time.
Hopefully nobody will read that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes from August 28th meeting. A second.
A second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. That's a unanimous approval. Our first monthly report is the performance improvement grid, which is one with the blue line across it.
What I'm handing out is a first page because as I was reviewing the document, I noticed that the comments were cut out in the column of the update column, so I wanted you to have the full text. The first item on this report is the percentage of calls to customer service answered within 60 seconds. This is a measure that we have struggled with, partially due to the way that it is measured and partially due to some technology. If you look in the update summary, the figures, we had been doing well for a while until August. In August, we had some technology issues, which put us back under the 95%. When we go to the monthly report, you'll see our average time to answer a call is 6 seconds. However, we must have some pretty significant outliers that carry us below the 95%. There is ongoing discussion with the state regarding the way this is measured, because not all LME MCOs measure it the same way. We count 100% of our calls, regardless regardless of the length. So if if there's a hang-up after 2 seconds, we count that call. Many LME MCOs only count calls that are longer than 8 seconds, and that impacts our numbers. But until we are told that we can do something different, we are reporting in that way. So we will continue our performance improvement project that's occurring in customer services, and we will continue to examine our phone system technology issues, which probably are alleviated by a recent upgrade in our phone system software.
You know, I was, when we've had the vendor on site for multiple days, just sitting there trying to understand what exactly was happening, it's maddening.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know who came up with the standard, but, you know, probably many healthcare facilities would die to get all answered. 95% of calls answered within 30 seconds. I mean, it's a great metric, and I think it's admirable that it's so high, but it's very high standard.
It is a very high standard, but it is our contract requirements.
Sure.
I mean, that is where it exists. I do not know where they came up with it either.
Yeah.
It would certainly be nice even if the state doesn't want to change and allow you to not collect data on those hang-ups or what have you, if they would at least issue a directive to all the other LMEs to do the same thing, so that it's
Yeah.
consistent data.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah.
I called the call center this week. I've been getting some calls from a friend's adult son who's been in crisis, been in the ER, and I called the call center, just asked some questions about what to tell them. They answered very quickly and fairly helpful, although he's kind of still in crisis, but I think he will.
Any other comments or questions on page 1? No? Judy?
The next two measures on this report are the percentage of complaints resolved within 30 days. Although our DMA contract allows us 90 days, there's a rule that requires us to resolve these within 30 days. As you can see, our numbers have improved, especially for the complaints or issues regarding recipients of Medicaid. So we are doing well there. The requirement is about 90%. We've had a little more difficulty bringing our standards for complaints regarding issues reported by recipients of state funds, but we are continually working on it. This particular metric, the state-funded metric, is a little harder to achieve because it's smaller in number, and therefore one outlier can skew the results significantly.
But we still met the standard and have been for the last couple of months.
Jointly, yes. The access to care report, all the other ones, we have no new data, but I did want to report for number 2, the access to care report, which is at the bottom of page 2, and continuing on to the top of page 3. We had Brian, Christina Carter, Carla Kibbers, who's the Senior Director of Customer Services, myself and Tony Shilo, the Senior Director of Clinical Operations, had a call with the state regarding this particular report. And in particular, this was DMA DDSAS. And the purpose was to talk about how we are measuring the data, because in the last quarterly report, the data was very, what they said, all over the place, which is pretty much how it was. There was such a wide variety of numbers across LME MCOs, and I wanted to follow up to this committee and report out that I did share Carl's concerns voiced during the last committee about comparing rural stats to those of urban counties. And they took note of that. We requested that could they compare like counties to like counties and like LMEs and LMEs because of the geographic and service challenges in rural counties, especially sparsely populated rural counties.
Thank you for following up on that. Further,
That's about all I have to comment on this, unless there
On the
are
report.
questions.
I have one question that I looked at this night on page, let's see, my pages are mixed up. It's on page 4. The CDW drug of choice. Could you explain, I'm presuming that's working off some formulary for psychiatric meds? Or no?
It's actually what it is, this is actually the consumer data warehouse.
Uh-huh.
And whenever we have when they enter the data for all the state-funded consumers who come into the system, if they enter a substance abuse diagnosis or a substance abuse illness, they have to identify the drug of choice, such as opiates or marijuana or alcohol. And this means they usually miss this question.
What does CDW stand for?
Consumer Data Warehouse. That's where we enter everything up and the state collects all the statistics.
I'm sorry, so in terms of, this is a drug of substance abuse drug? Okay.
So if I'm an opiate,
Substance use, our new term.
yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, so this would be just identifying which.
Right,
which-
not,
It would be for,
Okay.
not a prescription or
I
pharmacy
understand.
related.
Okay, I understand.
and it's only required if a substance use diagnosis is identified.
Right, okay. Well, it seems like that's an important demographic, I mean, an important
Oh,
issue to capture, just so you know what the extent of the problem. But I'm glad it wasn't, that wasn't my initial.
and we do have active performance improvement projects on this item, the CDW, and the next item. So, unfortunately, when the next quarterly report comes out, it'll be 6-month-old data, so we may not see the actual improvement in that report, but the subsequent quarterly report, because the data is so lags.
and so the item F is CDW screening records. The question above you said in C was whether or not they asked the question, correct? And so item F, the screening records, what is the measure there? Measuring?
The 90%, that's whether they complete it. The screening record is whether they even complete the screening record. That way.
Gotcha, okay.
And this is required to be done by the providers. However, it's reported out as an LME MCO measure, so it's kind of like we're getting a secondary level performance measure.
Are there any other questions on the performance improvement group or comments? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the monthly DHHS report, which
Really it's 3 items. So we have the data, which is actually on the long page, the executive summary, and then we have the trend document. I do want to say that I have a follow-up item here. I know that Carl asked last time about looking at the LME MCOs and comparing the data across all LME MCOs. I have followed up with the state and made note to them that they have not provided us with this data as they have promised, and the last data that we have is from April, which was brought back when this committee began. We've gotten nothing since. but they have made note of that, and hopefully they will renew their effort to honor that commitment. Brian, do you have any report on that from the CEO meeting?
True what she said. I can remember being in the room when they said, oh yeah, we're gonna do that. And that was a long time ago. You know, we might just do a workaround with it with the council staff. We could get everyone to send their data to the council. There's a staff person there that's recently hired that's in an analytical data position, and she could assemble it all since the state's not doing it for us. So that's, I think, probably where we're headed with it.
One of the things I looked at here, I'd love to hear Brian or anybody else's comments on the number of admissions, community psychiatric hospital admissions, and the number of readmissions. It is actually low in June, July, August compared to the other month, which is, of course, is good. I mean, it's the thing when I meet with the Western North Carolina Health Network hospital CEOs, that's one of their biggest concerns. And I just wonder, is this some intervention? Is it luck? Is it seasonal? It's good.
Well, how long do we have to talk about this?
Well, the summer would be good.
Yeah. Well, there are so many factors, you know, as you well know, that are associated with this. The ED part of it, I guess we could begin with saying that if you have a larger percent of folks who are going to seek, let's say, emergent care for a behavioral health or substance-related crisis in the ED, you are going to end up with a higher inpatient factor. It is just the nature of how it works, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I think some good and some bad.
Right.
So that's a part of it. How successful are we at diverting folks from that? We've done a lot of effort with mobile crisis, especially in the legacy Western Highlands counties, to really try to expose the advantages of that service and to get people engaged before going to the ED. We've been hammering on our comprehensive provider organizations to be a big front door portal. And a lot of this has to do with access.
Right.
And we want to just absolutely maximize that in an ambulatory setting, even for emergent care. But this is all very slow moving. And
It's been intentional.
Although, I mean, this is a 50% reduction.
Right, the admission to inpatient.
Yes, I mean, if I were you, I would publish a paper on whatever you've done, because I mean, this is the kind of thing I think that's pretty remarkable.
I don't know that we could tell you an exact reason why. I guess it's part of what I'm really saying to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I know all the things that we do, and you're always waiting for there to be, traction with those things. And
I don't think it's the ED admits, because if you
No.
look at the ED admits below,
Yeah, there's
it's actually gone up.
yeah, that's
Or pretty
Mission
much no
dominates
change.
that. Mission dominates that feature.
I want to ask y'all a question, and I don't know whether I need to talk about this in a board meeting or whether, since this is the Performance and Quality Committee, whether this is the place to do it, but I'm going to tell y'all about my week, and I want to ask y'all a question, because I know it's probably in here, but I don't know how the data would show up. I started getting calls from a friend of mine's 40-year-old son in crisis Monday, and I have had calls every day this week, except today, and I called him. He had been to the emergency room within the last 3 or 4 days of him calling me. He thought he was having a heart attack, but he was actually having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. They released him and told him he needed to go. They never did exactly admit him to the hospital. Told him he needed to go to a mental health professional about what was happening to him. Well, when he called me, and this family has a huge family history of mental illness and suicides. He called me in crisis, and I spent hours on the phone with him the last 3 or 4 days. And, but he wanted to go in of his own free will, because I said, well, you know, your history, your mother could get your son. He said, if the law pulls up my driveway, I'll be dead before they get out of the car. You know, if I can't go voluntarily, I'm not going. So I sent Brian Sheepman an email, and not for last, and yesterday Brian called me, and yesterday Brian called him, and he went in voluntarily to the walk-in clinic. But evidently, he didn't get the help he needed, because I called right before I left to come over here, and his mother called me 5 minutes before I got here. She had him in the car between Morganton and Hickory, trying to figure out what emergency room they're going to next, because he didn't get what he needed yesterday. You know, and I'm trying to figure out, so this would probably be the second time in a week to 10 days he's been in an emergency room trying to get the help he needs. It may not even show up on this, because he's not, unless he gets admitted. I'm a little bit disappointed. This is one of my best friend's 40-year-old son. And Brian Sheepman even called and talked to where he went before he got there, telling him how bad he needed help. He even told them, and they let him leave, that he thought he might go home and bust a cap in his head. Now, his mother called me 5 minutes before I got here, all the pieces, and I said, well, I just wanted to know how it went, because I'm fixing to go to a board meeting. And I said, you know, I intend to tell them how it went. You know, and I don't know how all that fits into these data things, but I know that something needs to be done different, you know. And the bad thing is, the boy wanted to go in voluntarily. He wanted to get what he needed voluntarily. He even called me yesterday when he called the clinic, couldn't get them to answer the phone. And I said, well, go in, walk in. But Brian Sheepman called him and got him to go in. He didn't get what he wanted. It's, you know, hopefully, you know, he's going to be somewhere in a doctor's office or somewhere in an emergency room before this meeting's over, because he's not stable, and he has sense enough to know that. But he's probably then going to be involuntarily placed, you know, and if he's not and he's sent home, God only knows what's going to happen if the law gets called. And if the law gets called and there's a suicide, we have severely, and there have been about 5 or 6 suicides in this family in the past 20 or 30 years. We have severely failed this family, because he went in voluntarily trying to get help yesterday. And there was like, well, you need to come back, we'll shoot the bull week, but you really need to come back next Wednesday before you get the help.
There are no beds.
Well, I don't think he's needing, I think he needs something to calm his anxiety down.
There's a shortage of beds, but I also would encourage the family to call us and file a grievance, because then we can investigate.
You know, and I don't know that he'll ever come back to one of these providers of Smoky. I mean, that's the hard thing. He's now in our other catchment area trying to find care, because he didn't really got what he needed from his own catchment area, which it was huge for him to walk in on his own. Huge. And, you know, I'm probably a little disturbed right now, because, you know, I was so hoping for some kind of different outcome.
Well, if we
And I
can,
know somehow it's supposed to fit into all this.
yeah, well, it does, because that's the real life, you know, story that somebody's experienced, so it's all about what we're talking about. But, you know, and I don't want to, you know, necessarily go on with this here, but we could talk afterwards and get some particulars. We could look into things, okay?
You can file a grievance on his behalf also.
But
But
you
then
might-
we can investigate the provider and actually,
Might
we
just
have
find out
a,
what happened.
we
All
have a
right, the thing
360.
about it though, to me, is not the grievance, it's him getting the help he needs.
Yes, you are involved on the individual level, but if a provider did that to him, you know, we need to look into the
And quite
provider
frankly-
issue so it doesn't happen to an individual again, you're right.
Quite frankly, I'm a little embarrassed, because if Smoky, a staff member, takes the time to call ahead and say, this person's coming, they probably really need some help, and they don't get the help, then what's the rest of them get? You know, so, but, you know, I'm gonna hush, I'm getting some more, but I'm gonna hush.
In terms of her question about the data, if you went in to the ED once. If he's Medicaid, it would be reflected
He's
on
not Medicaid, he
That's
has
what I'm saying.
insurance,
Okay.
which was another thing, he lost his job last week over all this because he couldn't. But, you know, he still has insurance, so, you know, I may have
Yes, he would not be
informed him wrong, but, you know, it's like he said, they told him, well, couldn't his family doctor prescribe him something, but family doctors many of them don't like to prescribe some of this stuff.
So Brian, do you want Pat to talk with you after the meeting, or? Okay. You don't need to.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, and that's another area at some point we need to talk about is there are people besides Medicaid people that need help from time to time, and we deal with them.
I always, every chance I get to point that out, I do, so I'm with you there.
Just as a comment, while we're talking about the ED, the numbers in March, April, and May for the number of admits who are active consumers as well as the readmissions all went up in those 3 months. It's probably something we need to just keep an eye on.
Yes, that's one of my, a statistic that's disappointing to me is the number of active consumers that enter AED. 57% of the consumers who enter AED are clients of a provider, and that's, want to look at that.
I had a little discussion about that at the board meeting too. There's a lot going on with crisis services, both for us and statewide, so we pay a lot of attention to that, put a lot of energy into managing that. There's some different, I guess, interpretations with service definitions that are coming about that are going to change that. There's some money available as part of the crisis services initiative that we're going to go after. So there's a handful of things all related here, not the least of which is us moving out of the Biltmore address and turning it into a urgent care center. So
The other thing that I'd like to point out on this data is under Medicaid only, the claims. There was the question last month of why the claims denials went up. And I talked with our claims director about that. And I had indicated last month that I thought it could be attributed to some to place of service mapping, which if the place of service on the claim doesn't, we just initiated some edits, but he also pointed out that June 30th is the expiration date for many licenses, and if they don't submit us the updated expiration date of their license and we don't enter it into the system, then that claim will deny.
Yeah, we actually have the same thing. And then the spike in July.
So it's down a little bit in August, but not much. But I wanted to point that out because it was a follow-up item.
Any other comments or questions on the monthly monitoring report?
you know, and I'm sure Julie's been good at pointing this out, you have to be really mindful of the metrics you're looking at and the extent to which they're for Medicaid only versus state only or both. And for example, the ED utilization, that's a Medicaid only, right? Yeah.
Yes, because we don't get,
Right.
I mean, we don't pay for
So,
state funded
Right.
consumers.
so just recognize that that's for probably maybe half, but probably less than half of the people that are showing up there.
So it's likely double, and the ones who are indigent are the ones who the hospital obviously is less willing to admit because they have no fund source. Unless we have a three-way contract with state funding.
I also wanted to ask, in your longer spreadsheet, number of provider fraud and abuse cases under investigation? It seems like a lot.
Seems like it's on the increase.
Well, I don't know if it's on the increase. I mean, it seems like it hovers in the range of around 10. What actually happens to these? I mean, what's the inside story of these? How severe are these? It seems like.
Well, in the past month and a half, we've issued notices of overpayment for $134,000. Those were considered to be waste and abuse and fraud.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
most of these referrals, the findings result in an uninformed or a misinterpretation. So we have very few actual suspected fraud cases, but we have referred 3 up to DMA, PI, and they have been accepted by the Medicaid Investigation Division for criminal investigation. 3 of them in the whole past year.
In the past year. And so I would assume most of these come from coding audits or
Yes, we
billing
do data
audits.
mining,
Okay.
and we do data mining, and we contract with IBM to use the state fraud and abuse management system, and they've
Yeah.
put in billing models that are specific to the different services. And so we have a data analyst that mines those. We also have care coordinators that touch the system and other pieces of our organization that touch the system, and if they see something that they consider possible suspicious billing behavior or the service not being provided in the way it was intended or quality of care concerns, they review it through our investigation oversight. And this particular item is just the fraud, waste, and abuse, but we do have other investigations also.
even 3 fraud investigations is quite a lot.
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
Well, and our largest, we sort of came into incidentally, and by that I mean, we were looking at actually a complaint that didn't have anything to do with a billing or whatever issue, and it's kind of, you start turning over rocks and find a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And again, Julie makes a very good distinction between, what is a willful act
Right.
versus some range of mistake or misjudgment.
I mean, that's a federal definition.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you just routinely audit coding for providers, you can get about a 10% error rate. Either under or over coding, one way or the other. Okay.
Anything else on this report?
These are good reports, by the way. I like the way they're laid out, and they're helpful.
We work hard to drill it down to this level.
Yeah.
IDD dashboard. There aren't many changes, but I do want to point out, it's the one that looks like this guy. Yes. It's on the back of that page that's with the narrative. The other one. Yeah.
This one.
Trying to put two-sided and be a little less wasteful. But the new waiver here began August 1st, and we have an allocation of 1,637 slots. Of those slots, we have to save 21 to be able to award during the year. But I did want to point out that although not all of our slots are filled, you can see in the table number 3, we have 1,581 slots filled. We do have all of the additional slots assigned. The backlog is with psychologists to do psychological evaluations, and then there are required functional assessments and level of care evaluations that need to be done. And because we have so few in our network that do those, it's a little slow getting those individual
individuals into those slots. But,
Do they have to be clinical psychologists to do that, or could they be LCSW?
if clinical psychologists, or an LPA,
Okay.
associate
Yeah.
to do some of the psychological testing,
Uh-huh.
but the LOC is a clinical psychologist.
Uh-huh.
Or in the case of a individual whose eligibility is primarily medical, a medical doctor could do it.
I see. Okay.
So that's all I wanted to point out there.
Any questions on the innovations dashboard? Okay. Would you like to go to next? Judy?
The next is this backup staffing data. I want to point out that this is aggregate data, and it was the staff's first attempt to do a report such as this. And I wanted to go back and get it monthly to trend, or at least quarterly, so that we could be more informed. However, immediately upon completing this report, she had a death in the family, so because it was assigned to this one staff member, I'm going to present the breakdown next month, or maybe the month after that. I won't be here next month. But this is the aggregate data, as you can see, October 2013, which is when we merged, through June 2014. So it's the last 3 quarters of the fiscal year 13-14.
To me, this doesn't seem like nearly enough providers. Are these just the only ones that submitted this, or is this everybody? Or?
That does go to the next one. Yeah, I mean, yes, that is one of the issues which, when you were at the CPAC retreat, Patty presented on the backup staffing monitoring project. Because this doesn't seem like enough providers, that's why we monitored on a provider who does a service that requires backup staffing. So I'm going to talk about those few slides next. But as you can see, there are a lot of hours of missed services that are in, if we turn to the side with the 3 graphs on it, the largest, obviously, are the 2 largest services that are missed are personal care and in-home skill building.
Where are we looking at?
This up here, the number of incidents.
In the pink?
Now, backup staffing is required for certain innovation services. So what that means is if a staff person cannot come to do that
Right.
service, the provider needs to provide a backup staff.
Right.
It's not required for MH or SA services, so this is IDD, for persons with IDD and innovation services. So the personal care and the in-home skill building have the largest numbers of incidents, and then it's a dramatic difference between the number of incidents for those and day support and community networking, but those are the 2 next.
Well, you know, there are all kinds of consumers I know looking for part-time jobs, which some of these are high-functioning consumers in recovery. Where do they post these jobs? I mean, they can't find part-time jobs. That's one of their biggest complaints. They want to work part-time. They can't find anything part-time. So, it's not.
Well, you actually see the names of the providers, and I don't know where they post, but each of these has a website, so I don't know there are different qualifications for every service.
You know, one of my, I don't know if this is Avalon, but one of these good folks over here brought up to me, and I just want to understand it better, the issue that when people miss hours and you've got caregivers at home, can the caregivers then fill in those spots, or how does that?
That's different. Caregivers are considered natural supports, and so sometimes when you missed hours, the provider is obligated to provide backup staffing.
Right.
But also, a parent is a natural support.
Right.
So it's a balance, But let's say, unless the parent, there's an approval process for a parent or a caregiver or guardian to provide services.
And then there's some kind of cap on a number of hours, or, I mean, I would assume that could be.
There is a hard cap and there is a recommended limit, yes. The hard cap that's supported by the Office of Administrative Hearings is 84 hours a week. And they recommend that families not be obligated more than 40 hours a week for services. We are coming upon a new day, January 1st, with things going on with the Affordable Care Act and requirements for benefits to be offered and requirements for overtime payment, that it's going to complicate things for anybody who works more than 40 hours a week and providers who employ anyone more than 40 hours a week.
So that will be
And it will,
federally mandated.
yes, and it will impact relatives who provide services.
And I presume that that cap will be lower than it currently is.
Maybe the cap won't be lower because the waiver isn't going to change. But for example, if family members will no longer be allowed to be contracted employees, they will have to be employees and they will have to be offered benefits and overtime.
Oh, my goodness.
So somebody that gets 84 hours a week, they would be able to provide 40 hours of the services, and the other 40 would probably come from an outside provider or an outside.
Okay, we can't say that because it's a business decision of the provider. They could still allow the family member to provide 84 hours a week, but it's a business decision by the provider regarding their ability and desire to offer benefits and overtime to their employees.
But that won't be an option after January 1st.
Correct, that's my understanding.
But what it could do is, it could be a situation, for example, like so many employers now are choosing to hire people at less than 30 hours to prevent.
Absolutely. We may see a
So
trend of that, and
likely
it's going
it
to
is-
topsy-turvy our system.
Yes, the likelihood is they're going to be looking for more outside employees than family members would be my guess.
I would think, I mean, again, this is the new stuff, but I would think that data would support that in general, family members actually make better caregivers. I mean, is there data, national data, or did that looked at?
I don't know, I can look for that, but it's a
I can
balance
look for
between
that, yeah.
being a paid caregiver and being a parent and the
Yeah, yeah.
natural support.
Yeah.
There has to be a mix.
Yeah, no, I understand that, that makes sense. It just seems like that's a shame that happens in January.
So I do want to point out on this page with the, before we're getting to 4 o'clock, but before we close, the graph on the left-hand side, the reasons given for being unable to provide the backup staffing. You can see the numbers. The top 3 reasons are the services were declined. I don't know what unavailable means. That's a very vague term, and then understaffed. So that understaffed is a big concern to us because that means that the provider is not doing their due diligence to hire the staffing needed to fulfill its obligations.
Why do you think Caldwell is the highest county when it comes to this?
I don't know. Geographically, they may provide more services in Caldwell County. I would have to look at that, but I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head.
You know, this isn't a rate, this is an absolute number, right?
Right, you'd have to find some way to equalize it, and I don't know even what the metric would be to do that exactly. Volume of service provided per capita or something, I don't know.
I just found it strange that 2 of the counties that have the greatest need seem to be where Smoky has offices.
Although what we're saying is that if that's an absolute number, so if we take, for example, say, you know, Buncombe County has 200,000 inhabitants, but, you know, Graham County only has 9,000 inhabitants, that would mean the absolute number would be naturally much smaller in Graham County than it would be, for example, in Buncombe.
And we need to look at the number of participants, the innovations participants in each
Right.
county. It's not necessarily in line with the geography, with the population.
You need to report it in ratios rather than absolute.
We're gonna work on refining this report. It's an important report to us.
Yeah.
But because of the concern about the numbers, back in the fall, we designed a backup staffing monitoring project. What Provider Network did was monitor every provider of innovation services that's required to provide backup staffing, went in and did a monitoring of each of those. So what you have with these slides here is just a really abbreviated version of the reporting regarding that. So there were 63 providers investigated, and the concerns were twofold. Number one, the concern was backup staffing is not being provided, but also that we couldn't regulate it because incident reports were not being done where backup staffing was not being provided. So we were unaware, and so our purpose was to go in and make sure that the providers knew of the requirement and filed incident reports so that we would know and could provide technical assistance to the provider regarding backup staffing, and we can take action. So of the 63 providers that were monitored, 25 of them were not submitting incident reports as required and are under plans of correction. So that's important to note that we are taking this seriously, and there are further phases in this monitoring process. I also do want to just note that one of Smoky's concerns is that in the state standardization process, the state is discussing doing away with these incident reports. And if they did delete or omit the obligation to file incident reports regarding backup staffing, we would have no knowledge of what was going on in the system as far as missed services. And we are speaking up, requesting that they keep this requirement so that we can be better managers of our system.
Important.
Can I ask?
So that's all of the data that I have for this committee today, unless there's other business.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? Can I turn this on and ask you?
Okay, what's your question?
Hi, I just have one tiny question. On this backup staffing thing, and where it says, I mean, it doesn't say if a person was ever left alone. Are you all assuming that natural support's picked up?
I don't think we're assuming that at all. The report, as I understand it, is a state level report, and so these.
It's just a report of data. It's not a report of.
Right.
Okay.
But these categories are defined
By the state, yes, they are.
Right. So if they don't have that category, then we don't have that category. Correct?
Yes.
I guess I need to let y'all know I will not be at the next month's meeting.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Are there any other things to come before the group before we adjourn? Any other business? Okay. Hearing none, we'll adjourn until our until the board meeting. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you for taking the chairing responsibility.
Sure. Thank you.